Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode in our Explorica Motorsport series. My name is Saidat. I'm the motorsport content lead here at SkillShark. Just as a small introduction again, SkillShark EduTech is an academically motivated startup focusing on imparting 21st century skills in the youth of today. What makes us unique is our approach and motive to impart these skills. We're actively trying to optimize and tailor courses and webinar experiences like the one we're doing right now for niche subjects, which may not otherwise be easily accessible for everybody. We also focus on actively developing educational modules for specific real world applications. Our latest series of courses have been tailored for specifically for electric vehicles and electric vehicle technology and engineering. So that's something that we also will be developing more on in the future, something for you to look out for. Right now, India is facing a major skill gap, and the issue has obviously been aggravated because of COVID-19. So we're trying to do something to add some more knowledge and inspire you viewers to involve yourself in different forms of engineering. So now getting back to Explorica Motorsport, a couple of months ago, we had Rev Mechanics, which is the moto student team from VIT, on board with us, and they've been our partner in this series ever since. We had a discussion with them and learned about the various tasks and the procedures involved in developing motorcycles and bikes specific for racing. Today, we're going to look at it from the other side. We are very fortunate to have a very experienced bike racer who has more than 10 years of involvement in the bike racing sphere in India. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mr. Arun Muthukrishnan on board today. To start off with, Arun, could you give a few words about yourself?
Yeah, hello guys. Yeah, it is very, I mean, first, I'm very honored and it's just great that there's more of motorsports. The exposure to motorsports is being, I mean, it's just growing right now. And I am just glad that everybody is actually looking into it, especially in India. So just I'll start with me because I'm pretty sure you guys have more questions on that aspect as well. So about me, I started racing in 2011, and my first race. I mean, when I started racing, when I knew that there was a racetrack in Chennai, which is my hometown, uh, I wanted to go experience it first. I just wanted to know because of course, everybody has this thrill for speed and the adrenaline, right? That you have to experience it. So when I started off, I just went there with my bike. I wanted to experience it. I just went on a usual track day, and the moment I went on, I just loved it. That feeling that I had was just like it was too good, and I wanted to experience it more. Because I was basically a sports person. I was into football before motorsports, and I like the competitiveness, and I like to compete and see how I am and also learn from others as well, right? My competitors and everything. So when I started off, it was just a usual track day, and I just loved it. And then I thought, okay, let me give it a try, more into a more professional look. And so I started off racing, and from then it's just been really great.
That's great to hear. Especially when you get onto bikes, bikes are very common in India, and more often than not, everyone as they grow up, when they reach the age to be able to ride on the road, the first opportunity they get, they try to do it because it's something that's very easily accessible for most. So let's club a few things into this. Firstly, you said you already had a sports background, so that already gives you a competitive edge in terms of being able to handle pressure and just outright be competitive. Motorsport being a very adrenaline filled sphere as it is. So how were you able to club that along with your hopefully your prior experience on the road with bikes? How did that factor into your first experience on track on MMRT?
Yeah, so basically, when I started racing, I was just about. I mean, when I went for my first track day, it was before I got my license, my road license. So this what happened was, I had an experience riding bikes, mopeds and everything, and bikes as well. So I and then when I tried to go out, I used to watch MotoGP and every other race, and then I kind of learned from by looking at it. by looking at how they act and how things are. I did a bit of research before going into the track, finding what a racing line is, what's a corner, how to maneuver a corner to do it fast and everything. But the moment I went in, it just all went all went off. I was just blank. And then when I started riding, when I went for my second lap or third lap, then it all came into place, and I started doing certain things. I mean, you mentioned saying that since I was already into sports, you know how sport works, right? So this is where I got my advantage, because I was already into football. I know how to take things. Like, I do one thing at a time. If I'm concentrating on racing line, it's all about racing lines, and I forget about body position, braking, and everything else. I try to master racing lines first, and then one by one. So this helped me gain speed quicker than my competitors or the usual people who are coming to sport for the first time. So I think this is one of the aspects that is very important for people to know, that they have to take each thing at a time, one step at a time, basically. Like, if they are looking to improve their speed, everything contributes together all together. So you first concentrate on one aspect of it, then master it, and then go for the next one. So that way, you know where you're going wrong and how you correct things and how to get faster in much quicker way.
Yeah, and of course, by practicing every single aspect separately, by segmenting and splitting up the entire process of racing into different chapters and focusing on them one by one, you basically practice it, and it becomes intuitive after a point, because racing has a lot to do with intuition and being able to react quickly to different situations. So yeah, that's actually really cool. To hear the way in which you've actually split and learned the different aspects of racing
Yeah.
a bike on MMRT. Now, what exactly was the bike that you tried out, and can you maybe run us through the different bikes that you've ridden over that time, over the past few years?
Yeah. So the first time I went on MMRT on a racetrack was on an Yamaha R15, and so it was one of those first sport bikes that came to India, like proper racetrack bikes that came in, and it was brilliant. It was a proper track machine, but on a production setup, right? So that was really nice. I was very fortunate to first go on a proper racetrack machine, and then experience it. But then from then I had experience with a lot of bikes, a lot of different categories in that aspect. So while I started off with, it was the 150cc category, that's the R15, and after that I moved on to 250. 250, I had a few experiences. 250cc category, that is the CBR 250s. And then I also have experience with the CBR 150. And then I went on to KTM 390. And then this year and for the past 2 years, I've been riding the TVS RR 310. And all these bikes have their pros and cons. All of them are just amazing. So I've had a lot of questions with a lot of people. They come and straight up ask me, "What's your favorite bike?" But I believe in this, that I don't have a favorite bike, because I want to learn the bike and I want to see how it reacts and understand it and ride it. So if I have a favorite bike, and then I'm just going to be more inclined to that setup of the bike. So when I have a change, it'll be very difficult for me to accept the change and go forward with that. So, but every bike has a very different aspect to it, a different characteristic. And with that, I enjoy the 400cc bikes more at this moment, because they're a lot of fun to ride around the track at this point.
Right. So, I mean, technically speaking, my forte is more in line with the uh, four wheelers. Essentially, when you look at the physics of a bike, of a two wheeler and a four wheeler, they're very similar. It's just one has one pair of wheels less. But just to maybe educate me and the audience, whoever's not very familiar with bikes, apart from just the CC, the displacement and maybe the weight of the bike, what are some of the other technical characteristics that differentiate the various bikes that you've had a chance to ride over the past few years?
Yeah, so I mean, there are a lot of difference on each bike or the each category that I've been riding. Uh, I would say, I mean, since with racing, every single aspect matters a lot. So even the smallest change makes a huge difference for us. So with the 400cc bikes, we have more of we can play more with the power, the engine delivery, and the ECU, that is the mapping and the suspension, everything. It's completely different bike from what a 150cc bike is. So if it's a 150cc bike, it's much more lighter and it's much more agile, and it's much more stable because it's very light. But when you go with the 400 cc's, it's much heavier. The power delivery is much more strong. So with that, it's a lot. Uh, can you hear me? I
Yeah,
think
yeah, I
there's
can
a
hear you. Yeah,
disturbance.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's fine.
that's fine. Yeah, okay. So with this, you have a lot of control over your bike. Like you can control a lot of aspects on how your bike handles, how your bike reacts to it. Like I said, so with the 150 cc's, again, you have your ECUs and everything. It still plays a huge role on that, but then you can still control it. The control aspect is very less. Like you won't be able to change much about the bike. There's not a huge difference. But with the 400 cc's, you have a lot more to control on the bike, a lot more to do, a lot more setup to do. And with those aspects, you can become faster. It helps you go faster, but also the smallest mistake will make you go slower, a lot slower. So with that, it's a lot more fun to set up the bike according to your riding style and the weather and everything else. So there's a lot of technicality to it, and I just think this is more fun.
It's
The bigger bikes are more fun.
right. Yeah. It seems very similar to when you compare it with four-wheel motorsport. Junior series, the cars are a lot the vehicles are a lot lighter, they have lower displacement, the sort of changes,
Yeah.
the technical regulations are a lot more, tight knit. So it's more about the driver or the rider's skill level as opposed to outright engineering and setup changes. But as you kind of go into higher categories like F2 and F1, it becomes more about the design and the unique aspects of that team's car that plays a role as well. So that's something really cool to think about. So we'll get to setups and tracks in a minute. But before that, I'm correct in understanding that you have a mechanical engineering background, right? Um, what led
Yes.
you to focus on mechanical engineering, and how has that actually helped you in your career as a racer?
Yeah, so basically, when I started off with my college, I was always amazed. I mean, I was always excited about cars, bikes, and how things were all mechanical things. So that's what made me choose mechanical engineering. Before that, I wanted to go into automobile engineering, but then I thought I wanted to explore more on the mechanical machineries and aspects of it. So I thought, okay, let me give a try on mechanical engineering, and that's how it started. But then that's been a huge help, or I think that's a huge decision that I made that helped me in a lot in motorsports. Because with motorsports, it's also about the setup, understanding what's happening with your bike. So as a rider, of course, you can feel the bike, you can accelerate, you can be a fast rider. But then for you to be much more faster, you need to understand the bike. You need to know where the bike, what's happening with the bike, so that you can help the tuners understand the problem and make it much more faster. So with this aspect, I mean, with mechanical engineering background, this has helped me a lot about bikes, how they react, what change needs to be done in that aspect, how the bike reacts and everything of that sorts. And I think this is one great advantage that I had being a motorsports racer.
So what sort of tuning and setup work is generally allowed for, let's say, the highest category of racing that you've taken part in till now?
So this one that I been racing was a 400cc super sport. So basically, we have different engines to it. We can have a different engine setup, and we have a lot of different suspension settings and the ECU. So these are the three main aspects, and of course the chassis as well, swing arm. We can make changes to it. So with these different aspects, we work on each and everything on a step by step. That is basically, we first decide on the engine, like what kind of an engine we are going to run for the race. So I mean, I can't go into too much details because it's confidential. But then so we go on a different setup, and then with that setup we see how the temperature is. So because each and every aspect of it matters. Even the weather, the track temperature, and the ambient temperature matters for us. And with that setup, we go with the suspension setting and the ECU. So we see how the power delivery is, and even the weight in that matters, because during the start of the race, I have a heavier front because of the fuel load, and towards the end, I have lower. So I have to manage that during the race time, because if I have a different setup with the chassis and everything, that helps me with the heavier front, then towards the end I'm going to suffer a lot more. So I'm going to have more chatter on the bike, and it's completely different, right? So we have a different ECU settings that we can change, but apart from that, we don't have an active suspension, meaning like we can't do changes actively on the suspension during the race or the chassis. So we go with we try out on half tank, full tank, and towards the low fuel, everything, and then we calculate the lap times and how I feel about it and how the bike reacts to it. Because during low fuel, what happens is, even if you shut the throttle, your bike dips in like way too much than it's supposed to. So with that, the entry of the corner speed and everything is affected a lot. And so we kind of compromise on certain things and see, on a whole, we see what the race pace is going to be.
Yeah.
The
So
fastest lap alone won't decide the race winner. So we need to go on the entire race timing and check how it is.
so bikes also have this characteristic of either understeering or oversteering, right? Is it similar to cars in that aspect, or do you have other
Yeah,
terms that you use for that?
it's basically understeer and oversteer. So that also, and the agility also matters, and how the bike holds on to the line. That also matters. It's basically all of them together. The different subdivisions to it, understeer or oversteer. So with that way, when you throw the bike, you need to have a lighter bike. Your suspension needs to be in the right place. It can't be too hard or too soft, because when there's a small bump, it needs to absorb it, but still the bike has to stay stable, so that you can throw the bike and start accelerating. Or if you need to trail brake, when you're trail braking and when you let the brakes go off, your front needs to unload. I mean, the rear, your front needs to unload very slowly, and the rear needs to load very swift. And it's not swiftly, but in a very gradual way, so that the bike still holds, and it also needs to handle the grip, the rear grip. So when I start accelerating, it still has to hold the grip. So there's a lot of aspects to it with the rebound and things like that. And yeah, that's what makes it more exciting.
Yeah, I think one really interesting aspect personally that I like about vehicle setup is damper tuning, because that's kind of like it's a really hazy and not very clear part of setup. There's no real right way to do it, and when it comes to
Yeah.
making your vehicle more compliant under bump, and then making a little more stiff and rebound just so that you get that planted exit, being able to shift your weight quickly to the rear just to get a bit more edge on traction and things like that. Uh, Really interesting for me. This whole discussion is it's really interesting because I have like an analogy with four-wheelers. So I mean, it's really fascinating to see that most of it is the same. But one thing that is very different between a bike and a car is that the roll moment that you feel on a bike is a lot more than what you feel on a car, because in a car, when the car rolls outwards, you have a set of outer tires that are holding the car down. But in the case of a bike, when you take a right hander, for example, there's always going to be a moment that pushes you towards the left, and that's why you lean into the corner, correct? um, Now there is a specific type of steering method to increase your turn in, and that's called counter steering. It's something that I've read about. Can you tell a little bit to the viewers how you use that to your advantage to quickly change lines?
Yeah, so I mean, the counter steering part, we actually, all of us subconsciously do it without us knowing this is what counter steer is. Because after a certain speed, we have the centrifugal force and everything, right? That's what behind counter steering. So with this aspect, what happens is, for us to throw the bike inside the corner, because there are three different ways to steer a bike to a corner. One is the counter steer, then your upper body, and your lower body. So you need to have all three in place to throw the bike faster. I mean, basically, the less time that you spend off gas is what makes you fast. So you need to do everything quick. And with the counter steering, it helps you change direction. Basically, that's what it does. But to have your bike hold on to the corner, to stay in the line, and to have the lean angle for a much longer time, you need your lower body and your upper body and the center of gravity to shift directions. With that, that's how it helps you hold on. But counter steering, it's a very quick way. Small chicanes or those aspects where we don't move much on the bike, that's where the counter steering plays a very huge role. You can just change your bike direction without doing much. With that aspect, counter steer really helps. And entry of a corner, counter steer is must for you to change direction quickly.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's something generally if you watch especially for the viewers, if you watch a race, if you watch a MotoGP race or any form of motorcycle racing on your TV or online, if you see slow motion captures of those videos, you can see riders constantly turning the steering outwards or counter steering, especially while turning into a corner, just to add that lean in apart from just their body weight to kind of throw the bike into place before steering it in the right direction. So that's something for all of you viewers to check out, after this video if you haven't already. Check that out. It's something really cool to watch. So let's just get a bit into the competitions you've taken part in. You took part in the 2012 Asian Cup at Philippines, right? One of the international events that you've taken part in. Can you tell us a little bit about how that experience was? Because I read that competition was very unique in terms of bike racing, the style in which it went through.
Yeah, it was a completely a different experience for us because the Asian market is there's a little more difference to the Asian racing from what we have in India. So they have something called the underbones. That's how they start the racing because it's a very unique bike. It's a different style bike which doesn't have a front fuel tank. And with that, it's very agile though. It's very light and it's quite powerful. And then with this, this is where we everybody learns to do it quick. Meaning, learn there's a lot of stamina that's required in the type of race that we had. It's called a Capri race, and so with this Asian thing, the racetrack was around a kilometer long. It's a 1 kilometer racetrack, which had 16 corners in it. So it was a physically demanding track, and it was 20 laps. So we had three of us from India represented, and it was really fun because the way they treated us was completely different from what I experienced in India in that aspect. The entire crew was there. Was very. We had a very warm welcome at the airport, and we had a separate immigration counter just so that we can do it all quick and then just go get on with our race weekend. And over there, so I would say I would give you one aspect of the bike, and you would understand how physically demanding it was. So the sprocket, the rear sprocket was the sprocket number. The teeth were around 62 tooth sprockets. So it's a really high acceleration, and even on third and fourth gears you will pop a VD. So that's how fast. And by the time your VD is done, you have to be ready for the next corner. So you have to push your bike down, but you can't just decelerate because it'll make you slow. So you have to push your bike down, start braking, and then turn into the next corner. So when I first went in for the first free practice over there during the weekend, I was around 6 seconds slower than the fastest. So that's how different it was because we were never experienced to that kind of a bike or the racetrack that we had over there. And by the race, I was just 0.5 seconds lower. So I was and a lot of fun over there with the top guys. I think the few competitors who rode with me, they are in Moto 2 and Moto 3 as well. So it was really fun riding with them, and it was a complete different experience. I think we have to do that more in India so that we get to learn more, more faster and get better in our riding skills.
I mean, 62 sprocket, no, 62 tooth sprocket. I mean, the level of torque out of that, it sounds more like it's
Yes,
almost like a motocross bike that you're riding on tarmac,
exactly,
right? That's
exactly,
that's that's really
exactly.
cool. Of course, it's a very different style of racing, and we've seen that in a lot of a lot of Asian specific series in racing in general. They have very unique styles, especially in Southeast Asia. So that's actually really cool. The fact that you had that unique opportunity to take part in that and learn, and hopefully, yeah, that's something else that can also be implemented here. Um, let's talk a little bit about the future of motorsport, especially in India. Now, generally, we talk a lot about four wheelers, but I've personally gone to MRT as well a few times, and there is a lot of popularity in bike racing. So how much do you think that plays in terms of having an overall development in motorsport, especially its involvement with the FMSCI, and how much of an impact two wheeler racing can have to the overall growth of motorsport in India?
I think right now, I mean, from the day I started, it's been growing at a very. I think it was growing at a slow pace, but then for the past 2 3 years, I think the motorsports, the two wheeler racing has grown in a much faster, and the exposure that it's getting is quite. It's going on a proper, or I would say, in a very good trajectory that they have towards it. And with this it should help because India being one of the largest country with most number of motorcycles, right? So it motorcycle racing would definitely make I mean, more exposure towards it would definitely make a lot of difference, because most of them, they generally understand what an F1 car is. They're all about F1 cars or car racing, but not a lot of people know what motorcycle racing also has. So with that aspect, right now, I also have another friend of mine, a good friend of mine from the racetrack, Rajiv. So he has featured. He's one of the ambassadors for the Honda Hornet, I guess Hornet bike. So he's become a poster guy right now, and there's a lot of exposure that's coming into it. So people are getting to know, okay, there's something called motorcycle racing that's also happening in India, and this should help us gain more traction. So when there's more people coming into the sport, of course the market is going to grow, and there's a lot of the future is really good, is what I am trying to say actually. So we are going in the right path, and I hope there's a lot more done towards it so that we reach it much quicker than uh, possible. Yeah.
Absolutely. Seeing that bikes are a lot more accessible than cars in general, as a person starts getting involved in you know transporting themselves on the road, it seems like a very good platform to generally increase the awareness of how important motorsport actually is in the development of all types of automobiles. Speaking of which, right now the whole world is going to an electric powertrain. And unsurprisingly, it's also happening in two wheelers. You have a lot of companies that are coming up with two-wheel scooters and bikes just in India itself. So the growth is massive. The potential is definitely there. Um, we saw the inaugural season of Moto E starting last year. Where you have the MotoGP electric equivalent, just like Formula E. And I believe there were also races this year. Do you see something like that coming to India anytime soon? On track as a junior feeder series to start with?
As of now, I'm not very sure about that. But then I am very excited about the Moto E or the electric bikes that are coming into play, because of course that's the future for sure. And I would also like to see racing be part of it, because racing is a very it's just not another sport. It plays a huge role in development of machines. So with electric motorcycle and electric motorsports coming into play, I think it's a huge, it would be a really good step forward in the way of development as well as the sport. Because right now we are just stuck with gasoline engines as of now. And when Aether, so I was a very small part of Aether when they started off. They started in IIT Madras, so I was a very small part in developing, very small part. It was really fun having to understand, and the way they got the feedback from me and how they wanted the bikes to respond. So that was brilliant. And since you have more control with electric, than the gasoline engines. It should be a lot more fun, and the torque is like too good. So the gearbox, the need of gearbox, and everything is going to change. It's going to change the entire game of what a conventional motorcycle should be. So I think I am really looking forward for it, and I also want to be a part of it someday, sooner or later. And let's see how that goes.
That's interesting to hear. I've heard companies using professional racers such as yourself as part of the development process. Not just in real life. Even if you look at sim racing and games, they're taking the involvement of drivers, because drivers and riders, after all, you're the ones who are operating that machinery. So you know what it feels like at the limit. So if you always create something that can perform at a high stakes environment, with high levels of factors of safety on track, if you bring that on board to commercial vehicles, you're definitely going to have a very safe and fast vehicle, especially with your involvement. So that's really cool to see, on track riders and racers being involved in active development of commercial vehicles. So I think we're a little strapped for time. We'll come to a conclusion. Maybe as a closing, a few sentences. Can you maybe inspire some of our viewers, if they're actually interested in being involved in motorcycle racing, either as a rider or an engineer? What would be their first step if they're currently learning engineering?
Yeah, so I mean, like I've had a lot of people ask me about how to get into racing as a rider or a driver, right? But it's really cool that how now it's changing. It's just not about just riding or driving, because the whole sport is not just about the rider. It's also the entire team that works. Like there are so many sleepless nights that they have to give us a perfect bike or a perfect car to get this happening. So the entire team is important, and I just love the fact like how the younger generation is also inclined towards building fast machines, fast and safe machines. So yeah, as a first step, I think the best is to approach a race team. Uh, as engineers, I think there are a lot of race teams in India, and when we start approaching them, of course, they're gonna need more guidance. I mean, right now, more minds are definitely going to be helpful, right? So with that aspect, when you go as an intern, you get to learn what the sport is, or how things are dealt, because it's a lot different from what a production bike is. All these are almost the prototype, but not exactly prototype. But so with these, it's a lot different. So one thing that I found out in my from my experience is, like we had few students come in to our team, the previous, I think in 2016 or some sorts. They were more into the production style, production mode of working. So they found it really difficult to get into it, to understand what's happening over here. So they just lost interest at one point. So what I would suggest is, go as an intern, see how it works, understand the team's way methods of working, and then get to it. So because as an engineer, it should be really easy to help them design certain aspects and get much faster. So with that, the only block I see is not approaching the team. And once you go there, you if you're still stuck with the previous work experience or the way of working things, it's going to be a little difficult. But apart from that, I think it is much required that more people come into developing bikes and seeing how it goes.
Absolutely. And I think this is the resounding message we're trying to spread through the Explorica series, is that you don't need to, you don't have to just sit and wait for an opportunity. Go out there, start approaching teams. If you're in university right now almost all colleges and universities have some sort of a automotive team in the form of formula student or moto student. You have baja events, so many opportunities to get involved in the basic design of racing vehicles, just to understand how to apply your engineering skills, not just to make a commercial vehicle, but also to create a high performance vehicle. And this is exactly what we're trying to do through the motorsport series. So thank you very much, Arun, for giving that closing statement. I think that's going to be really inspirational for a lot of our viewers. Um, I hope all of you viewers have learned something new about motorcycle racing. I know I have. It's something that I'm not very familiar with, so it was great to hear it from someone who has so much experience, such as Arun. So with that, let's conclude. Thank you very much, Arun, for your time. We are honored to have you on board today for the discussion.
The honor is mine as well. Thank you all so much, and it was really amazing. And I hope this brings in more exposure, brings more people's more people's dream, they can start approaching and working on their dreams as well.
Definitely, we'll hope for the best. And for our viewers who are watching this right now on YouTube, feel free to subscribe to our channel, follow us on social media. We have a lot more coming up in the Explorica Motorsports and Engineering series. And stay tuned. We'll be giving you updates very soon. Take care.